When you went to law school, you were trained in law school, and we all heard this, to think like a lawyer, and we know what that means. Have you been trained to think like a successful business owner? Have you been trained to think like a business owner? If you want a seven-figure law firm or you want a $5 million criminal defense law firm, have you been trained to think like a business owner who is in that position? If you want to know more, tune in and we'll delve into it.
You are listening to the Prosper Law Podcast. Learn how to reduce stress, have more time, and make more money. Come on in.
I'm Greg McCollum, and I built a seven-figure criminal defense law firm. I formed Prosper Law to show criminal defense law firm owners who are desperate for success how to grow from under $200,000 to $1 million and beyond. What does thinking like a lawyer mean? And we were all, when in law school, we were taught that. And we spent a lot of time and energy reading and studying and going to class and answering questions and doing the Socratic method to think like a lawyer. And how does a lawyer think? Really, a lawyer thinks one case at a time. If you're a lawyer, what do? And this is what we were trained to do: spot the issues, understand how the law is applied to the facts. So you know the facts, you know the law, and you know how it is applied or should be applied or could be applied or how it will be applied in this case if your arguments are successful. So that's you're trained to set up to take all of your skill set, all of your thinking, all of your analytical abilities, all of your human skills, and analyze the case. And that's what you do, and that's what we do. And what that involves is going from one case at a time. If you have a trial coming up, or you're prepping a case, or you're getting ready how to present the case, how you're going to create your defense. When you're looking at, like, your client's name is Johnson, and you're looking at, client Johnson, State versus Johnson, you're not thinking about anything else. You're not thinking about anybody else's case. You're focusing on that one case. And that's not what business owners do. Business owners focus on the business, and they may focus on one thing at a time, such as right now I'm working on marketing. But they're constantly thinking about the business, and the business is this organization, this organism, and it has different parts, almost like a body with a beating heart. How are the lungs doing? How's the blood pressure? They're taking almost like a doctor does when they give you a physical. They're checking it all. They're looking at all of it. Whereas in the law, you're just looking on the case, and that's what good lawyers do, and that's what you should do. That's what you have to do with your case. But if you spend all of your time thinking like a lawyer and analyze your clients and their cases, there's no reason to believe that your business is going to grow. No reason to believe it. And maybe you've been taught that or told that, like I was, that, do one case at a time, analyze on the case, do what you need to do on the case, and then get a successful resolution, and then your business will grow. There are a couple of problems with that. One is that, if, let's say you're a new client, or you just left the public defender's office or DA's office, and you know what you're doing, and you get a case, and now you get a fantastic result. And let's say, how long does it take to get the result? Does that take a year? Does that take longer than a year? I've had really, big cases. I've tried cases that were live streamed for the whole trial for over, a week or more, maybe 2 weeks. So I'm on television every day. People are tuning in. It's all the rage, and people are seeing that. Okay, that's one thing, but how long did that take to happen? It took 4 or 5 years, okay? And the other part of that is that if your case, you're going to do this blowout awesome job on it, and then it takes, say, a year and a half for the case to come to fruition, then the question is, well, who even saw it? So what's your marketing reach? the marketing reach when I was doing cases and winning cases and doing, I guess, what you call impressive work, who sees it? Well, the client saw it, and then the people in the courthouse saw it. So my marketing reach, was 10 people, 8 people. And then how long does it take for that reputation to catch up? So I had a good reputation, but I had no reach, okay? And so that's the limitation there. So as a business owner, you're looking at how do I grow the business? How do I make a better widget? How do I sell more widgets? Now, when you think about growth and how much you grew, I know that, like, out of high school, I went to Clemson University, and I remember the growth I experienced in terms of getting an education and in terms of getting a bachelor's degree. The growth for me was amazing. And I remember telling my friend, Johnny Price, who's a personal injury lawyer in Charleston, and we were roommates in law school. He's a really good friend of mine. And I was talking about this one time because he was saying that he had transferred from the College of Charleston, and he was in a liberal arts major. And when he got to Clemson, Clemson was not as good, at least in what we were studying, as the College of Charleston. And I remember telling him, well, I learned a lot. It was transformational for me. And he said, oh, well, you from Easley, South Carolina, so when you got to college and anybody said anything, you were just amazed, and that's probably true. But then when I think about law school, as transformational as college was for me, law school was more, better, faster. And I remember at one point I equated my first year of law school that I thought was the equivalent of 4 years of college. I learned so much about it, and it opened my eyes to it. And I don't know if other people had that experience. Perhaps they already had an understanding. Perhaps maybe they came from a family of lawyers, or they just had a better grasp of it. I remember a friend of mine in law school. I remember talking to her, and she's in law school, and she doesn't understand there's a difference between state and federal court. So she doesn't even know that. I think I at least knew that. But I remember as a teenager, when I wanted to go to law school, I wanted to look up the law. I wanted to know what the law was. I was curious and was interested in it. But what resources back then? And we were talking about, in the 1970s. I didn't know what a legal library was, but I certainly didn't know I would have access to it, because where would you find it? The local county bar. I'm sure they had a library, and if I'd gone down there as a teenager and said, I'd like to read books in the law library, they probably would have embraced me and let me look at it. And if the lawyers were in there, they probably would have said, who's this kid? What's he doing in here? They probably would have started teaching me, and had I done that, that probably would have been a really good thing. But I didn't know that. I didn't even know anything. And so I remember one time I had a legal question, and I looked it up. I was looking it up because my family, we had this thing called the encyclopedia. And I don't know how old you are if you're listening here, but the encyclopedia was just A to Z topics. You could look up things about animals or cars or whatever. It's like the Wikipedia page, but your parents would buy these things to try to give us access to information, and that was it. So there's nothing in really the encyclopedia that we had that explained anything about the law. And I find too that when I'm talking to normal people, non-lawyers, and they want to know the law, it's very frustrating. It's frustrating for them because I'm not explaining it. And I think that's one of the reasons lawyers get this reputation, is that we seem shifty and guarded because we won't give anybody a straight answer. And we know as lawyers that there is no straight answer. It's not math, it's a system and has the variables. So we look at that. And sometimes I've told people when they're talking about something that happened or a case, and how can that be? How could this happen? I don't understand that. Is that the law? So rather than try to explain to them what the law actually is and how it all fits together, sometimes I just tell them, I said, listen, when you're in court and say somebody stopped your car and didn't read your rights and made you get out of the car for no reason, and then searched your trunk and did this, and you went through this humiliating experience, and is that legal? Can they do that? And I'd say, well, they did it. And then the other thing is like, well, how is that okay? That can't stand. And they go, why is that? What is the law? And I said, well, if you're in that situation and the judge is deciding the case, the law is what that judge says that day. And then they just look at me like I have three heads, like, what are you talking about? And I remember a story when I was practicing law, and I think I was in the DA's office, and we had this judge who, there were a lot of things about him that I just really loved. And he was very difficult, and he did not like prosecutors. And because I was a junior prosecutor and he was our resident judge, they always put me in front of him. So I would take those verbal beatings from him. But it also helped me. But I remember one time he was doing something, and I don't know if he was suppressing a search or something, but he had ruled against me, and I think I asked to go back in chambers. So we go back in chambers, and he's made his legal ruling, and I'm sitting there. I'm young, and I'm ambitious, and I'm studious, and I always had research. So at that time, so I've got these cases, printed out and highlighted and marking them, and I'm saying, look, Judge Floyd, I understand you ruled this way, but under the law, I'm right for these reasons. And I cited these cases, and I said, was one case, it just came out, so I felt like I need to point it out to you because it says I'm right and I'm justified. And so the case had come out maybe a week earlier because I was in the advance sheets. I was looking for the latest thing to make sure I was up to speed and anything I could find that would help me. And so he said, he just looked at me because I said, this case just came out. I think it was 10 days ago or whatever. And he looked at me and he said, how many cases have come out since I ruled? And I don't think I really understood what he was saying. I said, and I'm talking about the case. I said, in those cases, he goes, no, Mr. McCollum, how many cases have come out since I ruled? And I looked at him, I said, since we were just out there in the courtroom like 5 minutes ago, how many cases have come out since you ruled? And I said, none. He goes, all right then. Well, that day, that was the law. So try explaining that to somebody, okay? So how do business owners think? Lawyers think about case, issues, facts, concentration on the case. How do business owners think? How do you think like a business owner? Someone taught me a long time ago that if I want to have a 7-figure law firm, then I have to start being, a 7-figure law firm owner. If I want to have, a multi-7-figure criminal defense law firm, then I have to think like the owner of a multi-figure criminal defense law firm. So as I'm making decisions about hiring, marketing, moving my location, improving my brand, anything that I'm facing to get to where I want to be, I have to put myself in that mindset and say, I'll just use the 7-figure because that's an easy example. What would the owner of a 7-figure business do? What would the owner of a 7-figure criminal defense law firm do? What decision would that person make? And it gives a lot of clarity, and it gave me a lot of clarity, because if I'm expanding my law firm to hit that number, whatever it is, and I'm looking at, okay, well, we're going to need another, intake specialist. We're going to need another paralegal. We're going to need another office where we can meet clients in a different location. We're going to need lawyers to handle the case. Then what that person would do is they would bring those people in. and they would look at the timeline and they would look at the budget and they would make a decision. They wouldn't sit there and say, well, I don't have the money, or this may not work, and so I'm going to hold off, and maybe I'll do it next year. They wouldn't do that, because if they did that, and if you were talking to them, if you were just at a cocktail hour and saying, it wouldn't make any sense to you. You'd tell them, you'd say, look, you just told me you want to grow your law firm. You just told me you want to double the amount of cases you bring in. How are you going to do that if you don't change marketing and intake and have somebody to do the work? You would just sit there, over beers telling them that obviously that's never going to happen if you don't do those things. So in that scenario, that's it. Think like a business owner. And what do business owners think about? They think about numbers. They think about improving their processes. They're thinking about having SOPs, standard operating procedures. They think about customer service. They think about what works, and they also see into the future. If you're a lawyer thinking about a case, you're not seeing into the future. When I've been arguing motions and trying to get judges to rule in my favor, and they go, well, we live in the past. We have case precedent. Has nothing to do with the future to be a lawyer. To think like a lawyer, the future is irrelevant. Okay? So, and I've been in these hearings and things where I'm asked, telling the judge, listen, what I'm saying is right. This is the way it should be. It's just the appellate court or the legislature or whoever hasn't figured it out yet. So rule in the way that's right and make new law so things improve. And at that point, the judge is they're just not aghast, but they're just defiant. Like, Mr. McCollum, I'm not going to change anything. The courts tell us this is the way it is. Whether you disagree with that or I disagree with that is irrelevant, because that's the law, that's the issue, and this is the way I'm ruling. And what they don't say is I'm screwing you over, screwing your client over. It's a terrible result. It's unfair. I know it's unfair, but I have to do it. And if you look at an example of that, I don't know if you've been there, but you got somebody on a drug crime for whatever reason. Now they get convicted with something with a mandatory minimum. And I remember specifically a case which was a burglary case, where armed robbery burglary, and we tried the case. We lost the case. The jury, and I told the jury what to do, but they, quote, followed the law and then came back with a guilty verdict. And I remember in that situation, the jury came, they had been released, excused, and they were so engaged in the case. They were so concerned about the outcome. They cared about my client when I explained how he got in this mess trying to help his no good brother. And they left. They went to the back, and then every single one of them came into the courtroom, and they sat in the audience or galley or whatever you call it. And then, as the judge sentenced my guy to the mandatory minimum on burglary first, I think it was 15 years without parole. So in other words, they're taking this guy who was on leave from the military because of a health issue, who would simply, if this had been resolved, would have gone back into the military, would have had a great life. Now, his brother, it was a different circumstances. Nobody was feeling sorry for him. So the jury comes in, and I remember that the only people, in the courtroom that were not crying, I think, was me and the prosecutor and the judge. Everybody's crying. And the judge, the right thing to do in that situation would be to suspend the sentence and not give him the 15 years. But the judge is not going to put himself on the line for that, because that's not the way we have to do it. But the mandatory minimum in that particular case is just one example. I could give many. That would have been the right thing to do, but he's not going to do it because it's looking in the past. It's somebody else's problem. I'm not here as a judge to do what's right or better I don't care about the future. So as lawyers, we live in that. Business owners are completely different. Nothing is good enough. Today's way of doing it is today's way of doing it. Business owners want to do it tomorrow's way. Business owners look in the future. They focus on the future. They know what to look for, or they at least know to start trying to look for what to look for. And it's this, if you look at, successful law firm owners or business owners, we know this stuff is going to happen. We go from the yellow pages to the internet to now we're going into artificial intelligence. So who's going to get left behind? Who's going to be the law firm owner who doesn't look into the future, and they're a great lawyer, they're looking into the past, they're doing everything they're supposed to do, but their business is not going up, it's going down, and the period of time in which we live now, where 50 years of change can happen in 5 years, you can be wiped out. Just because you have a thriving criminal defense practice today, depending on what's happening, it could go away, and it could go away quickly. And if you practice a long time, you've seen older lawyers who were like it's almost like a bell curve. In their early days before you knew them, they struggle, they might talk about it. They get up on a plateau, they ride that plateau, and then they start declining slowly as they get older and just don't, quote, have it anymore. And we see that slow decline. Slow declines are not the norm anymore. Slow declines are being replaced by cliffs because of the rate of change. So what do you get up and think about each day? What I get up and think about each day is, how can I improve the 7 parts of my business: the marketing, the sales, the people, the systems, the physical space, and the metrics. Who am I being? Who am I becoming? Who am I leading? Now, in order to do that, you have to have some white space, and white space is uninterrupted time on your calendar where you are somewhere and no one basically has access to you. No one's calling, no one's texting, nobody's emailing, or if they're doing those things, you don't know it because you're in your white space. And take some time to carve that out. Pick some time each week where it's sacred time. It's like, think of it as like going to church. If you go to church, you're not on, well, I hope not, you're not on your phone. During that time, you're focusing on church. It's sacred time, and people know not to call you during church. It's rude to call you during church. It's rude to drive to the church and walk in there and disrupt the service and pull you out. So your white space, think of it like church. That's the time that you think, what would the owner of whatever you want to be the owner of do? And think about those things and start to implement those things and start to learn and grow. If you'd like to know more about growing your criminal defense law firm, because all I talk about, all I coach, all my masterminds are nothing but criminal defense lawyers. That's it. We just had an event in Myrtle Beach, a mastermind event, and one of the spouses is a estate planning lawyer. She had done some coaching, but some coaching programs it didn't work out. She got out of it. And she was asking me, Greg, can you recommend a coaching program for me as an estate planning lawyer? And I don't know of one. I said, you can go to the general coaching programs. You can pursue that will help. They're good, but I don't know of a single one. I do know of and I can't remember the woman's name. She does a thing for estate planning lawyers, but it's a done for you, in the box, where you buy the thing, follow the instructions, and do the thing step by step. And that sort of thing will work. It could work, but there's nobody there to answer questions. There's no support, and you need support. Now, so I don't know what she's going to do. I don't know how she's going to find that, because she cannot find something that doesn't exist. It's not like that for criminal defense lawyers. It was like that But I have the coaching company, Prosper at Law, have the mastermind groups, which are going now, and people are changing their law firms. It's exclusive for criminal defense lawyers only. So if you're interested in that, go to Prosper at Law events. Just Google Prosper at Law events. You'll see our next mastermind. If you're interested, there's a sign up. You sign up and join, and then you take that step to start finding out what you don't know and what you can do to start changing your life, so that next year you'll look back and see how much you grew and how much you changed your life to make your life what you really want, and I would say what you deserve if you do the work. Hope this was helpful. Until next time, I'm Greg McCollum.
If you want to know more, go to prosperatlaw.com. We show criminal defense law firm owners how to reduce stress, have more free time, and make more money. Thanks for listening.